Hi everyone. Today we're going to be learning the pelvic bones for SCB 203. So we're going to be learning about 7 different structures in this session. Okay. Let's go through each one before we identify them on the figures, because some of them have kind of an odd pronunciation and odd spelling. The first one is the os coxa, also known as the coxal bones. Okay. Then we have the ilium, then the ischium. Okay, notice the spelling difference between the two. It's kind of easy to get them confused. And the pubis, or pubic bone. Okay. We have a structure called the acetabulum. And we have the obturator foramen. So from this word right here, we have an idea that's going to be an opening, a hole. And finally, we have the pubic symphysis, also known as the symphysis pubis. Either one is correct. Okay, so let's go through these one more time. We have the os coxa, or coxal bones. We have the ilium, the ischium, the pubis, or pubic bones, the acetabulum, the obturator foramen, and the pubic symphysis, or symphysis pubis. Okay, let's take a look at the figures now. Okay, so here we see the pelvic girdle. Okay, and on the right side, as I have done before, we have the colored illustration. On the left side, we have a figure of a model of a bone. Okay, we can see here what's not in color is the sacrum and the coccyx. Okay, because that's part of your axial skeletal system. But what's nice is in these color-coded figures, we can actually see that the pelvic girdle is composed of several fused bones. Okay. Now, we can make an imaginary cut down the pelvic girdle. Each half will form what's called an os coxa, a coxal bone. Okay, so you have a right os coxa, and as well as a left one as well as a right one. Okay, so here as well, here's the left one and here's the right one. Okay, so let's start naming the structures that we can see in this figure. Now, what's nice about these color-coded figures is that we can see the fused bones that we cannot normally see in the actual model of a bone. Okay, so in this pink color is the ilium. Okay, we see an opening called the obturator foramen, and it's formed by an anterior pubic bone or pubis that forms the medial connection. Okay, as well as the anterior ring of the obturator foramen. And in blue, we have the ischium that forms the posterior ring. Okay, since we can't see the areas of the fused bones on a model or a real bone, on the exam, we'll name it fairly obvious. So here will be the ilium. Okay, here's the pubis or pubic bone, and in the back will be the ischium. Okay, and now we can see the opening called the obturator foramen. Okay, now additional structure is a piece of fibrocartilage called the pubic symphysis or symphysis pubis. Okay, so if we had asked for this structure, you'll say the pubic symphysis or symphysis pubis. Either one is correct. We might even ask what kind of cartilage it is, and you might say it's fibrocartilage. Okay. Now, what's not so obviously seen on the lateral side of each os coxa is the acetabulum. Okay, this is where your leg or your femur will form the socket here. So you could ask what structure articulates laterally to this pipe right here, and you would say it'll be the head of the femur. And if we just ask for the bone, you would just say femur. Okay, we'll have a better view of these structures in the next figure. Okay, so let's name them one more time. The ilium, the pubis or pubic bone, the ischium, the obturator foramen, the acetabulum, and the pubic symphysis, or symphysis pubis. Okay. One more point is that we can see now that the sacrum medially articulates with the ilium. Okay. Or likewise, we could say the ilium articulates laterally to the sacrum. Okay. Here in this figure, we're looking at the individual os coxa, which is a little more challenging because we don't see the pelvic girdle in its three-dimensional, frame, so it's a little more challenging. But if you look carefully, you can figure this out. If you notice, we see the acetabulum nicely here. Okay, and so if you see the acetabulum, you know you're looking at the lateral view because this is where the leg is going to be, articulate with. And you notice the ilium is, of course, is this flared-like structure here. So you put your hands on your hips. You're putting your hands on your ilium here. But the pubic bone and the ischium can still be identified too. Notice the pubic bone is kind of pointed here, and it's rounded. The ischium is kind of rounded here. So you know this is the anterior side, and here's the posterior side. Okay. On the bone here, we have the ilium, we have the pubis or pubic bone, and here's the ischium, and here's the acetabulum. Of course, the opening in both is the obturator foramen. Okay, so it's kind of easy. If you see the acetabulum, you know you're looking at a lateral view. Here we're looking at the medial view. Okay, for one thing, we don't see the acetabulum. And another piece of evidence is you see this roughened area right here of the ilium. This is where it articulates with the sacrum. So that gives you another piece of evidence, other than not seeing the acetabulum, that we're looking at the medial view. And we can still name the structures. Here's the ilium, okay, the rounded ischium, and the kind of pointy pubis or pubic bone. And of course, here's the obturator foramen. Okay. Of course, in this real bone, the pubic symphysis is not here. So if we ask you, so you got to be careful that when they point to here, and they'll probably ask for the name of the bone, and it would be the pubis or pubic bone. Okay. Now, another type of question might be is whether it's a right or left bone. Okay. So, what do you think this is? Is this a right bone or a left bone? Okay. Well, let's see. Well, we see the acetabulum. So this is the lateral view. Okay. We know that this is the pointy pubis or pubic bone, so this is going to be anterior. And here's the rounded ischium. Now the question is this a right or left? Okay. Well, if you picked left, then you're correct, because if you kind of imagine that you pull this out, so it's pointing this way, then the ilium would flare outward as it normally would. Okay. If you're not sure, compare this figure with the previous figures, which are the right os coxa. Okay. So this is a possible question that could be on the exam for the os coxa, or pretty much any bone, any paired bone. We could ask you whether it's right or left. Okay. Finally, probably the only male-female question we could ask on the exam is about the pelvic girdle, that we would ask on the exam. There are other differences we could ask, but we won't go into that much detail. Okay. Okay. And probably the easiest way to identify whether a pelvic girdle is male or female is by what's called the pubic arch. And this is the angle that's formed by the two pubic bones. Okay, if you notice that's wider in the female for the birth canal, that makes it kind of obvious that this is a female pelvic girdle. In the male, the pubic arch is narrower. Okay. Now there are other ways of doing this, but this is probably the easiest way. Okay, of determining whether it's male or female. Okay, so I won't go into detail the other ways of determining it, but you can read it either in your lab manual or your lecture textbook. Okay, but this is what I usually go for in determining male or female. And it's probably the easiest way. What's wider, it's female. If it's narrower, it's male. Okay, of course, on the exam, we're not going to show you both of them. We'll only show you one. Okay, and so now you know you have all the different structures and names of the bones to do well on the pelvic girdle on the bone practical exam. Okay.